Greetings, my good bitches. The name's Francis, Coke Francis. I'm an editor, comedy writer, drag artist, and I'm here because I definitely don't have a personal vendetta after losing a roast battle a couple weeks ago. Also here because I am obsessed with this outfit. It's giving Vlad the Impaler. It's giving Brienne of Tarth. It's giving Clive Rossfield. All the people with like shoulder things. If you've been here since the very beginning, you might have noticed that I changed my intro a while back. I'm a filmmaker, stand-up comedian, drag artist, meaning I still write stuff for the old chuckle and giggle every so often, but I did used to do stand-up comedy and I did quit. And I can say this with absolute certainty. I have never been happier. Also, in case you were wondering, I didn't perform as Coke Francis. I performed under my human name, which will remain classified on this channel, unless you already know it, in which case, shut up. Now, there are a few reasons as to why I did this. Part of it was a time issue. I just didn't have time to spare between a day job, freelance work, this channel, and being a piece of shit and playing Spider-Man 2 for days at a time. Another part of it was that I just, wasn't that great at it. I wasn't bad, but I wasn't very good either, and I realized that it is entirely possible to write jokes and entertain people outside of doing stand-up. I definitely don't regret doing it for the time that I did. I met some great people, I learned a lot, including that doing comedy isn't exclusive to stand-up, and when I realized this, it was so liberating. Plus, I still do roast battle, which is way more fun and speaks to my toxic competitiveness. But honestly, the biggest reason I quit is the scene and the vibe in general. A lot changed after the pandemic, big fucking surprise there, but I remember actually having a lot of hope for the future of live entertainment. All that awfulness would eventually pass and people would be dying to go back out and experience live entertainment, and not to toot my own horn, but I was right. And when the pandemic was still raging on, I did a couple of Zoom shows, which in a way were depressing, but also kind of inspiring. A bunch of people were coming together from all over the world to try out the jokes they had been writing in the solitude of their own homes. I would be on shows with people in Finland and India. It was wild. Then everything opened back up and I was dying to get back on stage and see all the people I had become acquainted with over the years. But I just couldn't help but notice that the vibe was different somehow. As you know, comedians aren't really known for their cheery dispositions and infectious positivity.
You know, you're right in that sweet spot between suicidal and actually dead, where most comedians, they thrive there.
But it was just a different vibe and not one that anyone would really want to be around. Even though everyone was dying to get back on stage and start grinding, or whatever open micers like to call it, everybody from amateurs to professionals would act as if they would rather be anywhere else. But I don't think that this was only due to the pandemic. I believe there's something much larger at play here, and that's what I want to get to the bottom of. Why does stand-up comedy have such a weird vibe now? But before we solve this mystery, if you're a fan of watching a very tired drag queen talk about nerd shit forever, I ask that you please DM a booker through Facebook Messenger and beg to get on his bringer show in Santa Monica. When he finally agrees, prove to everyone that you are a real comedian by not telling any jokes, but instead going up on stage and unzipping your pants and dick slapping those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. So stand-up is really like any other craft. A very select few actually have a real talent for it. Some people are good but not great, and the overwhelming majority are anywhere from mid to terrible. This goes for art, music, filmmaking, writing, underwater basket weaving, any creative profession. It's also like any other paid job. Very few are really cut out for it and can weather the industry and become successful in it, and most others can't. Same with working in healthcare, sales, sex work, whatever. I happen to be in the majority for both. I was decent but not great, and I ended up not thriving in the scene the way that I had wanted to. Obviously, this is just my personal experience with it, and I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not here to shit on the art form itself. The romantic idea of stand-up comedy is inherently intriguing. And you're right, this is the last time you'll ever hear the words romantic and stand-up comedy in the same sentence. Maybe you've been told your whole life that you were funny and should try stand-up. Maybe nobody told you that, but the idea of going up up on stage and entertaining people is glamorous. It's an entirely unique form of instant gratification without farming for likes on social media. You know, like what I do now. And believe me, when you do perform and people actually laugh and enjoy you, it is the most satisfying feeling of all time. All you have to do to attain this is to get on stage and be funny. Seems simple enough, right? Well, there's a reason there's a running joke in the scene about guys who went into stand-up because all the guys at the office said he should. But hey, I think everyone at least has the right to try out something that they like, and I don't want to shit on anyone's dreams. I'll let the scene do that for them. And I don't want to say that too many people are doing stand-up, but too many people are doing stand-up. And I don't want to say that too many of them are bad, but I think too many of them just don't have judgment. I did stand-up for a few years, I worked hard at it despite my full-time jobs, wrote all the time, and I still came to the realization that, you know what, this just ain't for me. And I accepted it, and I moved on. And I've been doing YouTube instead, which fits my weird style of comedy so much better. And then you have those guys, we all know them bitches I'm talking about, the ones who pay at least $5 to tell the same 5 jokes that they've told for the past 5 years in front of no more than 5 people. The ones who post their open mic dates on Facebook and pretend that they're actual show dates. The ones who are called out for either sucking or being openly bigoted and then claiming that nobody can handle them. The ones who fantasize about being cancelled because they've never been scheduled in the first place. I think this really just comes down to a lack of self-awareness and judgment, and it's kind of sad to see all these people become laughing stocks behind their backs, because they've just convinced themselves that they're just living in everyone's heads rent-free. And thank God we have audiences to tell it like it is, since comedians rarely will for fear of losing stage time or being blacklisted. The last thing I want to do here is gatekeep, especially in a scene that I'm not even a part of anymore. But these are objective observations that anyone can see because they have eyes. Here, I'll let goated comedian Patrice O'Neal explain this since he actually knows what the hell he's talking about.
People ask me who my favorite comedians are, is Richard Pryor and George Carlin, and I didn't look at them and go, that's what I could do. Right. I looked at them and said, I'm funny, but I can't do that.
Well, you know what?
Now people watch comedy and go, shit.
So yeah, the idea of getting up on stage and entertaining people is glamorous, and it's also one that will inevitably attract narcissists. Obviously, I'm not saying that everyone who does stand-up is a narcissist, but it does take a certain amount of chutzpah to say to yourself, I believe I can get up on that stage and tell jokes and people will actually laugh at me and not cringe. And usually, the worst comedians are the most narcissistic. It takes chutzpah to get up there and do your thing, but it takes narcissism to just ignore constructive criticism and put yourself on a pedestal that you're unaware is actually at the bottom of a trash can. Now, these people have been around since the art form was first made accessible decades ago. This is nothing new, but at the risk of sounding old because my older comedian friends told me I should bring this up in this video, so blame those old fucks, not me. The effect that social media has had on stand-up is undeniable. I don't believe that it's inherently a bad influence, but it has changed the landscape considerably. Back in the days of yore, many, many moons ago, there was a little social media site called Twitter, and it was owned by a man named Jack Dorsey. Anyone had the ability to post little blurbs or thoughts as long as it was 140 characters or less. Now it's 4,000 or 10,000 or something ridiculous like that because the unfunniest man on the planet wanted to make comedy legal again or something. But in between spoiling series endings and bitching about Square Enix or thinking that hating pancakes makes you racist, Twitter was also a great space for comics to share their funny little musings and jokes. Or just for funny people in general. The funniest people are not comedians, just to be clear. A lot of successful writers and comedians gained big followings on Twitter. Now, obviously writing jokes in under 280 characters won't mean you're gonna be a great stand-up comic. But a lot of people thought it would, and this turned into people posting their stand-up sets on other platforms. There's nothing inherently wrong with posting your sets online. It's a great way to get your name out there and get feedback from people, if you can handle the cesspools of hatred that will inevitably come your way. I know some people who already had moderate success and then skyrocketed during the pandemic due to their TikTok content. There are some people who are talented at both stand-up and TikTok content, and fuck them for being so cool. But the two aren't mutually exclusive. And then there are some who can't do either, bless their hearts. But like any other lane of internet content, the market eventually becomes oversaturated and then nobody is special anymore. There are comics out there like Matt Rife, who had been doing stand-up for over a decade before he started posting crowd work sets on TikTok, and that's when he really blew up. His success has made the unfuckables of comedy very upset because they finally realized that hot people are capable of being funny after telling themselves the opposite for their entire failed careers. But then, good old everyone at the office says I should do comedy, sees that, films every open mic they ever do, and puts it online. And then thousands more do it, and the standards are continually lowered. Not the audiences, by the way. They can smell dog shit from a mile away, and they will make their opinions abundantly clear whenever somebody posts a Hiroshima-level bomb set. The standards are lowered for the comics themselves. Anyone with a working phone and $5 of open mic money can just record themselves and upload it online and say that they're a comedian.
No, you want to put all your shit up on the internet and have every single person say, hooray for you, fuck you. You're all pricks.
You're probably thinking, come on, Francis. These people are just chasing their dreams. Why shit on them and go after the little guy? Well, don't get your jock straps into jam, because we're about to eat the rich alive. You don't think I'd dress like this and not commit a murder, would you? Back in my woke boogeyman video, I brought up something that I also like to call the cancel culture boogeyman, which was bastardized into something idiotic on both sides of the spectrum. On one hand, canceling was harmful because it would imply that somebody is incapable of growing or learning after doing or saying something that's offensive, and then being canceled would potentially discourage them from wanting to grow and learn. This is something that I stand by to this day. But instead of making that simple acknowledgement, cancel culture turned into another big bad boogeyman who's gonna get ya in the middle of your podcast while you bitch and moan about they them pronouns. And it became the uniting factor between two groups who seemed as though they would be at odds with each other forever: comedians and conservatives. So much so, in fact, because we all know how much conservatives love to cosplay as victims, there's a new kind of exclusive comedy special that you can get nowadays. Move over Netflix, move over YouTube, move over Peacock, or whatever beta D-list streaming platform is offering comedy specials these days. If you can pander to the right crowd and throw as many buzzwords together in a comedy blender as possible, you could actually earn the opportunity to record a stand-up special for Fox News. That's right, good bitches. Is Netflix's woke agenda just too much for you to handle? Were you just unable to distribute your special anywhere and then couldn't even sell it on your website? Well, Fox News is now becoming your one-stop shop for washed-up comics who needed an audience to practice their shower arguments with their liberal family members. Roseanne Barr and Rob Schneider have made comedy herstory by becoming the first, and probably not the last, comics to record a special for the channel that fired Tucker Carlson. They finally have their own safe space to tell their woke jokes to an audience that doesn't understand satire, and will be shielded from all the big bad mean gays who hurt their feelings by saying their comedy was outdated. No, but really, do you guys realize how batshit fuck nuts it is that Fox News is recording stand-up comedy specials? Even the Daily Wire hasn't tried anything that absurd. Thankfully, they're sticking to movies that range anywhere from mid to making me jealous of Helen Keller. And what's their defense? It's the freedom of speech we're fighting for. They're trying to take away our freedom of speech. First of all, who is they? Second of all, conservatives work tirelessly to take away our freedom of speech, which is why they're trying to ban books and critical race theory and gender studies and drag shows. I mean, it's mostly just to deflect from the fact that their congressmen and youth pastors are systematically abusing children, but that's a story for another time. Now, I and most other people see these Fox News specials for the absolute jokes that they are. I'm not Rowdy Roddy Piper in They Live or Dante in The Virility Factory, but this sentiment is echoed across the entire comedic landscape by the people at the top, and the people below them just eat it the fuck up. I guarantee that at least one of your favorite famous stand-up comics has made the "you can't say anything anymore" claim. Even some of mine have. And you always want to emulate your heroes, right? If Dave Chappelle is a victim of cancel culture, then so are you, vaguely dumpy white guy at the open mic. A completely made-up boogeyman could never take those chicks with dicks jokes away from you. And this goes for any multi-millionaire comedian who made their fortune off of the claims of "you can't say anything anymore," even though they get a new Netflix special every other week. Just like the leaders of pyramid schemes, these rich comedians will talk about the poor broke mindset, and fans will see it as inspirational and motivational. I guess it's cool if you pay a minimum of $100 to hear a multi-millionaire lecture you from their perspective, but I personally paid that money to have somebody make me laugh for an hour. When I sit down to watch a Dave Chappelle special, I'm here for the jokes about titties popping out of turtlenecks, not to hear about how hurt his feelings are by the gay and trans communities. To each their own, I guess, and to think we're the snowflakes.
Look, if these are the confines that keep you from doing the craft God put you to, then it probably ain't for you.
Regardless of where these specials are airing, rich and famous comics believe that they can get away with not telling jokes and instead just saying things that pander to their audience. And unfortunately, they're kinda right. Doesn't matter if there are laughs, it's the applause that matters. It's exactly what Norm Macdonald warned against. God, I miss Norm so much, dude.
JetBlue Air ranked first for satisfaction among all North American airlines. But you know what ranked least in satisfaction? 9/11 Airlines. What a terrible name for an airline. It reminds me of that tragedy.
I know what you might be thinking. Well, what about you, Francis? You sit there in your ivory tower, talking shit on the most successful people in stand-up when you yourself quit. What gives you the authority to talk about these modern-day philosophers as if you could do any better? Well, don't get your tits in a tizzy, because you're right, I don't have the authority to talk about this, but I know someone who does. If you've never heard of a comedian named Robin Tran, then good God, get your life together and look her up. I guarantee she will become your favorite Vietnamese transgender lesbian comic of all time. She has specials on Hulu and Comedy Central. She's a roast battle extraordinaire. She was on My Time with David Letterman on Netflix, and she's a beacon of light in the massive shitstorm that is the LA comedy scene. And I'm lucky enough to be acquainted with her because she gave me permission to quote this article that she wrote for Chortle. And it really sums all this up better than I ever could. As much as I used to love podcasts, I think the oversaturation of comedians' podcasts in the past few years has been bad for stand-up comedy as an art form. I'm not talking about all or even most comedians, merely a group of some of the top names who are mostly famous from their podcasts rather than their actual stand-up. It becomes the norm for much of a comedian's podcast to be ads, something that used to be unheard of when podcasts first came into popularity more than a decade ago. It's no longer a shameful thing to sell out. It's encouraged to make as much money as you possibly can. And if you even dare criticize this greedy nature that a lot of comedians have been developing, you'll be slated for being weak and naive just because you aren't joining in on this money-making scheme where the actual stand-up becomes secondary. There's a group of free speech comedians who are constantly complaining about cancel culture and how they can't say what's on their mind. But what they're really talking about is their own personal fear about losing the money they've made. Their fears have nothing to do with free speech. What happens is they'll think of a joke inside their own heads, think about posting it or saying it on stage, envisioning audiences being upset and everything being taken away from them, and then getting upset about the fears that they've imagined. And while they're self-censoring, they claim, "You can't say anything nowadays," and fool people into thinking they've told an offensive joke when all they've done is complain on their podcasts that they can't say their thoughts, which they allude to, but never actually say. And this is another money-making scheme. If they can make their audiences feel that free speech is taken away from them and the comedian they're listening to is the only person who's fighting for that speech, their audience will give them money to keep fighting the good fight. It's no different from getting an email from a politician asking you to donate $5 to their campaign because they're the only ones who can fight against fascism. Here you go. You dropped this, queen. Now, it's pretty clear who this article is referring to, but the effect that they've had on other comedians is palpable. And nowhere has this become more apparent than in the evolution of one of my all-time favorite comedians and one of my personal biggest influence on my own work, Tom Segura. I've been following Tom and his comedy for a long time now. Not just since when he was still fat. I mean back when he didn't have a beard. Around 2017, I started following his podcast, Your Mom's House, which he produced and co-hosted with his wife, Christina P., another stand-up comic. I wasn't really a big fan of Christina's stand-up comedy, especially when she got a little too daring with ethnic humor, but she was actually my favorite part of the podcast. I'll be the first to admit it. I have a weird, dark, very fucked up sense of humor. I laugh at shit all the time that I absolutely should not laugh at. Like, it got me in trouble as a kid. And I'll be damned if this weird, dark, hilariously fucked up podcast didn't lift me out of some of the most difficult times of my mental well-being. Even when everything else was awful and my mental health and self-esteem were in the gutter, I had this show to look forward to every Wednesday where I could just forget about my problems and laugh my ass off for 2 to 3 hours. There's just something about a funny Gen X couple commenting on the weirdest, silliest people on the internet and making their own memes and inside jokes about them that genuinely helped me out of depressive episodes. At one point, they started having the most amazing lineups of guests. Everyone from Scott Thompson to Jessica Curson to fucking Big Daddy Kane. And in addition to laughing my ass off, I learned a lot about stand-up and comedy in general from the pros that I looked up to. Then came Two Bears, One Cave, another YMH production that Tom hosted with Bert Kreischer. Now, I know a lot of people might disagree with me here, but I actually do like Bert in small doses. At times, he can be pretty insufferable, and the interview that he did with Adriana Chechik was genuinely painful to watch. But at the end of the day, I find him pretty entertaining. I don't mind the fact that he laughs at his own jokes because that kind of energy is infectious, and honestly, I wish I had that. Like I said, in small doses. And the chemistry between him and Tom was undeniable, especially on the day where they single-handedly created one of the greatest podcast moments of all time.
KoolAid to start your day?
KoolAid is fucking awesome. Take a little, pour a little something for yourself.
You really drink
Ice
KoolAid?
cold. It's ice cold, yeah.
You are drinking KoolAid.
Yeah. It's awesome.
You're drinking a fucking 64 ounce.
See, these are the experience that Joe Rogan listeners missed out on. We're over here laughing at grown men drinking gallons of Kool-Aid and meth heads on TikTok. Where were you? Arguing the benefits of DMT while respectfully disagreeing with Ben Shapiro? Fuck out of here. But that brings us to Joe Rogan and his influence on not just his audience, but his peers and his colleagues. Joe moved from California to Texas because of more freedoms or something, even though they sell weed here in California like timeshares and hotcakes. But soon after, a lot of comedians followed suit, all based on claims that the comedy scene was popping off in Austin. It was basically the gold rush for all the comedians who fell for the whole free speech is under attack thing. Tony Hinchcliffe has made himself especially comfortable in Austin, and you know what? It's just so great to see so many opportunities out there for wind-up chattering teeth toys. Shane Gillis and Ron White moved there, Tim Dillon moved there, and then quickly moved back to California, and Roseanne Barr moved there where she landed a special for Fox News. But the most notable Austin exodus within the stand-up scene was, you guessed it, Tom Segura and Christina P. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with moving somewhere that you like and you think would be better for yourself and your family. Austin is supposedly a super happening town, and maybe Tom and Christina thought it would be a better place to raise their kids in. But with their move, both before and after, came a shift in content and tone. The videos they featured went from weird, silly, funny shit shit to things you could have found back on eFucked back in 2009. When possible, they would sometimes reach out to the weird, silly people that they poked fun at on the show, and sometimes they'd even interview them, sure enough finding out that they are real people and should be treated as such. And some of these people, their stories were fascinating. If you want to watch a really good piece of YMH content, look up Josh Potter's interview with Robert Paul Champagne. It's an experience. Both those men are very special. Josh is also really funny, you should look him up. They went from guests like Scott Thompson and Too Short to fucking Andrew Taint, who, by the way, they used to regularly make fun of, but then when he was a guest on the show, they stopped just short of licking his balls. Their jokes were rarely outright mean-spirited. Now they just spend an inordinate amount of time talking about how weird and stupid people with they, them pronouns are, and look, I'm sorry, I don't need a rich couple pushing their 50s to lecture me on what should or shouldn't be inside my pants. I'm not sure if it was the move to Texas that gave them brainworms, but it was definitely their echo chamber. They just got sucked into the myth amongst rich comedians that their freedom of speech was under attack, so being the independent artists that they are, they just went and did exactly what their friend Joe Rogan did, since he was one of the figureheads in creating that whole narrative. And now Joe has his own comedy club inside of his $10 million mansion where he and other Gen X comics have a safe space to, I don't know, be as unfunny as they want, I guess. Combine Tom and Christina falling for that hook, line, and sinker with Tom's newfound love of flaunting his wealth and status on social media and his podcast, and you've got an imminent downfall amongst your fans. So there are a number of times on the pod where Tom and Christina would seriously commit to a bit, and it would fuck with the staff hard sometimes. And it would definitely fuck with the audience, especially if they were way too high to figure out if what they were doing was a bit. But at the end of the day, it was always a bit, and those who had been watching the pod for a certain amount of time could usually tell. So when Tom posted this absolutely unhinged rant on Twitter against an airline employee who made him check his bags, my first instinct was that it was just a bit. Then he started responding to fans, and he kept responding, and after a while, to our horror, we all realized this wasn't a bit. As always, there are his ride or die fans who come to his defense anytime a comedian is called out for shitty behavior. It's a joke, guys, calm down, you're all a bunch of whiny triggered snowflakes. Okay, let's say it's a joke. Ain't nobody laughing, dude. In this case specifically, where is the joke? Is it where he calls an airline employee a cunt, unironically? Is it where he shits on his fans for being poor, unironically? He's a comedian, he built a career off of trying to offend people. If you're pursuing a comedy career with the sole intention of offending people rather than trying to, you know, make them laugh, then hot damn, I have some unfortunate news for you. If you're making the same edgelordy trolling jokes that any idiot could make behind a computer screen, then maybe you shouldn't be selling out arenas. Now, not that this is an excuse or anything, but there has been a notable change in his behavior ever since his father passed away, which is completely understandable. I remember being legitimately sad when I found out that Tom's dad had passed away. He was such an important part of Tom's stand-up and such a formative figure on the podcast, and it's clear where Tom got his sense of humor from. Grief changes people. I know this better than anyone. But so does money and fame and an echo chamber of other rich people who reaffirm your beliefs and encourage your toxic behaviors. That being said, rest in peace, Top Dog. I am far from the first person to notice this, and there is a growing resentment amongst his fan base. Tom used to be the alternative to Louis C.K. as far as the funny fat dad type goes. Not that it's a bad thing that he lost weight. We are super happy for him and the fattest, most racist man on earth, who fucks dogs, I hear. Him being fat wasn't what made him relatable, it was just that when he was, he had a more humble and down-to-earth mindset. And even though it was the so-called poors who got him to where he is now, he really just makes comedy for other rich people now because that's who he relates to. So, to answer my question, why does stand-up comedy have such a weird vibe now? The answer is simply Capitalism. It's always capitalism, isn't it? It's like how Old Man Jenkins was always the culprit in every Scooby-Doo episode. Before I end this video, I just want to say that if this sounded like a bitter tirade against the art of stand-up, then I sincerely apologize, because that is absolutely not my intention here. I love stand-up comedy. I grew up watching the greats. I'd wanted to go into it ever since I was 15 years old, and I really did enjoy it for the time that I did it. I have comedian friends who are so funny and so talented, and they deserve every bit of success that they have and more. The reason I made this video is because I love stand-up and I care about its future. I don't think the art form is dead, and there are so many talented comedians that you absolutely should go out and support right now. But where we're at right now, I'm just worried that we're on track to it becoming just another commodity and another money-making scheme. And I believe that it deserves better than that. If you've reached this part of the video, congrats! I can't believe you put up with this rant for this long. Now, I love stand-up comedy and a good semi-hot dad, but you know what else I love? The winning comment from the last video. Andre Martin's 7150 says, "To be fair, if I got that comment about my back hair, I would quit drag, or at least stop wearing open back dresses in drag." What's worse for open back dresses in you guys' opinion? Back hair or acne? Because I stopped wearing those for one of those reasons, and I'm not telling you which one. You too can be featured in the next video. Leave a comment below, and I will pick my favorite one and give you a shout out next time, and pin you to the top of the comments section. If you would like to see more of my clown mug elsewhere, please consider following me on Instagram or TikTok. My handle for both is @QueenCokeFrancis. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't done this already, please DM a booker via Facebook Messenger and beg him to put you on his bringer show in Santa Monica. When he finally agrees, prove to everyone that you're a real comedian by going up on stage and not actually telling any jokes, but instead unzipping your pants and dick slapping those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. And, of course, as always, until next time.